Hickey's actually going to go first, so if she needs to get back to the toddler, she can. And she's going to talk about developing healthy sleep habits. Mrs. Spinlove, our ECC counselor, is going to talk about how to address childhood fears and anxiety. And then we're going to kind of put the chairs in a circle. Mrs. England from pre-K is going to come. Miss Marston from toddlers is going to come. We have Jenny Flum here, who is parent of 4, and physician too, who's going to kind of join a forum. And we're going to have an open discussion about potty training, what works, what doesn't, what questions do you have, so that we can just kind of chat about that very challenging time. Every kid's different too. All right. I will open it up to Mrs. Hickey. All right, Mrs. Hickey.
Hi. Sorry in advance for my voice, in case I need to blow my nose for a second. I am here to talk about developing healthy sleep habits. I'm by no means an expert at all, but what I do want to focus on today is the underlying reasons why children sometimes struggle at bedtime. So, 3 of the big reasons, and this is from Dr. Becky Kennedy, author of Good Inside, one of my favorites. Separation anxiety. So it's kind of as if they're getting dropped off at school. A lot of those similar feelings arise. They have to separate from you. They can have anxiety, and just the idea of leaving your side can be difficult at night. Worries pop up a little bit more as they get older. Nightmares can happen, but I think it's just the idea of their body slowing down, things get quiet. Maybe you can even relate as an adult, your mind starts racing at bedtime, so that can pop up for kids. It can be hard for them to be alone and try to manage those feelings. And then object permanence. Kids don't have the same understanding that their world is going to be the same when they wake up as when they go to sleep, so they can start to feel nervous, like what is going to be the same as mom and dad? Are they going to be there? My toy's going to be there. So a lot of this can create resistance and heightened emotion at bedtime. And then of course other factors like that these things are normal, and working through it with consistency is one of the best things that you can do. Nap transitions, somewhere between 3 and 5 kids may start to drop their nap, but that can make bedtime a little more difficult until you figure out the right timing. I see some of you nodding your heads like, it's difficult to know when they're really ready to drop a nap. Their nap might become shorter during the day. You might think they're ready to drop, but then they're like a mess at bedtime, so that all gets really tricky. And then having an inconsistent bedtime routine. Kids thrive on predictability and consistency, and as much as we try to provide that, things can happen at bedtime. You get busy, someone else might be putting them down, and it can throw off their confidence in what's happening and how to anticipate their routine. And then of course, one of the biggest things, and I think themes that we talk about in general with kids and how to make them feel safe and comfortable is connection with us. So at the end of the day, that's really what they're looking for, and having that time with us. So that arises a lot at bedtime, and putting that time in and recognizing that that's probably the biggest thing, is they just want to connect with us. Helps me at least to understand, and I'm super frustrated and really tired, and I just want my kid to go to bed, that they really just want to be connecting with us. So if I can remember that and focus on that and put that time in up front, it usually decreases those bedtime struggles. And I wanted to share this video of his dad talking about, this is actually his morning routine, but I think the idea is very similar.
Sometimes, I have to check this out. Yeah, there we go. Miss Hickey, I forgot to check this morning, like we talked about.
We'll get there.
He said, put my son to sleep last night, so he was excited to see me in the morning. When I went in to wake him up, he asked me if I could lay down with him. Now, I was in a hurry. I needed to get him and his sister ready, drop him off at daycare, and then get to a meeting. But I didn't want to say no. So I told him, sure, son, we can lay down together once you go to the potty, wash your hands, and brush your teeth. Now he's a little less excited, and he's dragging his feet to the bathroom and finding reasons to get distracted and stalling. So I tell him, hey, the longer this takes, the less time we have to snuggle. So let's get it done. And I go get his sister ready. I come back from getting his sister ready, and he's got nowhere. Now there's no time to snuggle. So I'm taking over. I put him on the potty, wash his hands, brush his teeth, get him dressed, brush his hair, put his shoes on, his coat on, give him a granola bar, we get out the door. Whole time he's fussing. Everything is taking longer than it should because he's not cooperating and I'm in a hurry. Well, we're walking to the car, he's stomping and crying, but I gotta get him to daycare and get to my meeting. I put his sister in the car seat and go over to strap him in, and he's struggling with me, trying to fight me off with his 2-year-old self. I said, son, we have to go, let's get buckled in. Tears in his eyes, scream, crying, he said, I want a hug, Daddy. I want a hug. I pulled him out of his seat and I gave him a hug, and I realized that I was going to be late for my meeting, not because I was hugging him then, but because I didn't hug him when he first asked for it. He started his day asking to connect with me. He had spent a night without me and needed time to connect with his dad, and I responded to him telling me his needs by telling him which of my needs he needed to meet first. He didn't know how to handle that because he's 2. Here I am thinking he's just fussing at me while I uphold this routine, when in reality I'm crushing the excitement he felt when he saw me in the morning. In fatherhood, every time I think I'm teaching a tough lesson, it turns out I'm learning one. I'm learning that connection is not a luxury but a need, and I'm recognizing how strong my 2-year-old son is for recognizing and clearly stating his need despite being distressed. It's a good kid.
This was so meaningful to me because I think at the end of the day we're tired and we want the kids to go to bed. It can be a really exasperating time in the day. But if we think about, they've spent all day a lot of the time away from us, and we get home and we're doing dinner and cleaning up and packing lunches and all that time, and sometimes they just really need one-on-one time to talk to us, and they may not always ask us in these gentle ways of I need a hug. It may come out as a tantrum or crying or protest at bedtime, but when you understand the underlying, the deep-seated need for them to just be with us, it makes sense, right? So, that being said, again, I'm no expert, but a healthy bedtime routine, what does that look like? And it can be so different for every family. I think if what's working for you works, that's great. If bedtime in your house takes 30 minutes or an hour and that's just part of your routine, that's great. I think it can be different, and it can be different for every kid. A lot of this is their temperament and your family. But again, focusing on connection, and one way that I know we do that in our family is 10 to 15 minutes of intentional one-on-one time, and this is before you start bedtime routine. I think in general that helps kids, but especially if you're seeing bedtime protests, if you can spend that time with them. And a lot of times kids love it if you say, you're in charge, you get to pick what we do, whatever silly game they want to play. Trying to do the same thing in the same order every night, which to us seems monotonous, but for kids, again, it helps them anticipate what's coming next. It makes them feel safe and confident. So PJs, brush teeth, 2 books, 1 song, and then the choice can vary. And what books do you want to choose? What song do you want to sing? And if you're finding that that is difficult, you can help your child by involving them in setting up this routine. So if you don't already have this in place, you can make a book or make a list or a visual schedule and then review it and talk about it before bedtime so they know what to anticipate, and it helps remind them of what bedtime will look like. If and when there's pushback, I find that the most effective thing is to just have a really simple response that you repeat. So if they're getting out of bed or if they're crying for you, you wish that mommy would stay and snuggle. I'm going to be nearby. You're safe in your bed, and to stay as neutral as you can, which again, I know can be really difficult. And then, I don't know about you, but in my house, there's a lot of parental preference, especially when it comes to bedtime. And it can vary between me and my husband, but one thing that I think helps is to try to switch off. So even when you know it's going to be smoother if you do it, or if your husband husband does it, your partner, trying to switch off so that they feel comfortable that the other parent can confidently do bedtime and talk about it before bed. It's daddy's turn, it's mommy's turn, a babysitter's coming tonight. You could put a picture by their nightstand if they struggle with that, or a little sign, like a heart, different colored hearts. It's mom's turn, it's dad's turn, it's babysitter. So again, they can anticipate that before bedtime. Then here are some additional things to try. Some sensory activities if you feel like your kids are really amped up before bedtime and whose kids are not. It's counterintuitive to me to think of doing like high activity things, but it actually helps calm their body. So a blanket parachute is having two adults and holding onto a blanket. Obviously this is with maybe a smaller child, holding the blanket and swinging them back and forth. Pillow chops, you can get a pillow. They do like karate chops into the pillow. Kid sandwich or a pillow squish. My older son loves this. They can lay down on the couch or the bed, and then you put a pillow on top of them and kind of like smush them down so there's pressure. Toddler toss into the bed or a bean bag, pick them up and just toss them into bed. Bubble Mountain, this was new for me. Like a straw or a thicker tube. You've ever seen those accordion tubes that kids play with? Into a sink filled with water and soap, and they blow, and it just helps reset their like vestibular, their body, so it helps calm them down. And animal walks, be a different animal on all fours, crawling, kind of a game. Pillow crashes, same idea as toddler toss. Bouncing on an exercise ball or like a peanut. And if you have a baby at home, like holding them and bouncing them up and down. And then pushing heavy objects, like a laundry basket full of clothes or books. And then if you find that control or routine or connection are more of the challenges, just offer choices. Creating a bedtime mantra or a song that you repeat every night. Mom and Dad is near. I'm safe. My room is cozy. A social stories, I talked about this with your bedtime routine, but kids really respond to pictures of them, and you can have them help write a story about what bedtime looks like. And this one I haven't done, so I don't know. One, get out of bed free pass. So if your child is getting out of bed a lot, it helps them to feel control if you give them one free pass. So they can get out of bed, but it's just one time. And people say it's really successful, so if anyone tries it, let me know. You might need that in the future. Tucking in their loveys or dolls, so this helps them be in charge of bedtime and kind of walk through the routine and get comfortable with separation and connection. Making a little bed for them, even if it's something small, you can get like a tissue, like a blanket, and cover up. And then we use a visual timer sometimes so that my son knows when playtime is about to end and we're going to start the bedtime routine. So you can use a sand timer or a timer where it counts down and they can see, or they can understand a clock to the timer. And that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Hickey. Okay, in case Mrs. Hickey needs to get back to her class, and for those of you who don't know her, Mrs. Hickey is one of our early learner or toddler teachers, and she is a wealth of knowledge. So if you have questions about this or anything right now, feel free to ask. Any questions, comments, and things anything you guys have tried that's worked?
I hate to say it, 4.5, we still are always trying things, but the thing that connected the most for my son was trying it out during the daytime. So like when we change anything about bedtime routine, or hey, we have different rules, you're getting older, like staying up a little bit more, you have some more independence. He now says like, great, we'll do it today before bedtime and then I'll know. So then he feels like if you try it for the first time and everyone's exhausted, it's a little hard. So that's worked well for us. But it's worked-ish well.
That's great.
Until it
Like
doesn't anymore.
act it out and like
Yeah.
play.
And he
bedtime.
puts us down to bed.
Yes.
Yeah, which is big. when
Which
he's in
is
charge.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets to be in charge.
I get the right to sleep. I'm very good at
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. All right, so next is our early childhood counselor, Abby Spinlove, who's going to talk about how to address your child's fear and anxiety. All right, Mrs. Spinlove.
Okay, so the first thing when you're like in addressing fear or anxiety with your kid is to know that the goal is not to like eliminate the anxiety or the fear. We can't really avoid anxiety, that makes it worse unfortunately. So we have to give our kids the tools and the confidence so that they can feel like they can deal with it. So when you're responding to anxiety and worries, there's some really important do's and don'ts that we're going to go through. The first do is to validate the feeling. You want to be empathetic and understanding about the feeling. So saying something like, I see that you're worried about that. You are safe. It's okay to feel worried. Everyone gets worried sometimes, and we will figure it out together. So having like a little script that you say and like repeat, like it's okay to feel worried, everybody feels worried, and you're safe. That can be really helpful for kids to hear that over and over again. The other one is normalize feeling anxious. So if you're reading a book at bedtime and you notice like, oh, this person's feeling worried in the book, or naming your own feelings of worry and anxiety, like if you're driving and you're like, oh, I feel worried about this car in front of us or something like that. That might not be a good example actually, but like things like that. Or if you're watching a TV show, having like and a character feels worried, naming that. That can be really helpful just to normalize feelings of worry and anxiety, which is really important for kids. The other thing you should do is practice skills when your child is calm. Just like Charlie's mom was talking about with bedtime, practicing that when he's regulated. If you're practicing deep breaths and like different calming strategies when they're already calm and you're building that into your routine, it can be really helpful because when they're completely flipped and dysregulated and really anxious or worried, they can't access those skills. They can't learn a new skill. They're not ready to do that. So if you're practicing them before, it can be helpful to pull out when they are in those really anxious moments. You also can model how to handle worry appropriately. So if you're showing your child that it's okay to be worried and that like you have the tools to handle it, that can be really helpful for them. If you're worried about, I'm trying to think of like a worry that's appropriate for adults, but like if it's really snowy, you could say, oh, I'm feeling so worried about the snow. I'm gonna take a deep breath or something like that. Just like simple things that aren't gonna like really mess with their brain and make them feel unsafe. But hiding your anxiety from your kids is like not the best thing because we want to show them that like people do feel anxious and people do feel worried and they can handle it. And then talking through what could happen and coming up with a plan can be really helpful for kids too, like things that are like going to the doctor, or if a kid's really worried about what if you're late picking me up from school, like that's something that you can come up with a plan for, like, oh, you're feeling worried about mom being late picking you up. If mom is late, you would go to aftercare, or things that can have a solid plan. Like I feel for grown-ups this can be really helpful too, like thinking through the worst case scenario. So like when I'm on a plane, planes like freak me out. And so I looked up like what would happen if a plane just fell out of the sky. And like knowing like what happens is helpful because then you're like, oh, okay, like I can think through this. I can calm myself down because I know what's gonna happen. So if you find like you have really big worries, sometimes looking at it from the worst case scenario can be helpful because then you know like, oh, worst case scenario, I'd be fine. So like the kid version of that, don't do that with kids please, but talking through like that could happen and we have a plan for that because we can't like, you don't want to lie to kids and be like, oh, mom would never be late for school because sometimes things happen. So things that can have a plan it's helpful to have a plan for them. Something else you can do is set a time limit on worrying. Some kids get like stuck in a feeling cycle. Feelings sometimes like give them a stimulus, so like being stuck in that feeling can kind of feel good, or it's just like what they know. It's like stimulating to them. And they can just like get stuck in that loop and feeling and talking about it and going through. So if you set a time limit on worrying, that can be really helpful. This is also helpful for adults. Like, okay, we're gonna worry about this for 5 more minutes, and then we're gonna come up with a plan of what we can do together next. And it feels like counterintuitive, like to be like, oh, you can only worry for 5 minutes. But I think when kids get stuck in that cycle, a distraction is really helpful. And that's gonna help them move on quicker. But the most important part of that is doing something together. So after you like set the limit and you have like a visual timer or whatever, when that time is up, finding something to do together, because then they have that connection piece and it feels better for them than just being like, I only have 3 minutes to worry. So the next one is work through your own anxieties. If you are struggling with anxiety yourself, kids are really perceptive and they can pick up on that really easily. If there is something that you know you're really anxious about with your kid, like doctor's appointments, you can have, if it's available to you, like a partner step in and go to the doctor's appointment with the kid instead, so you're not putting that anxiety that you're having on your kid as well. Yeah, and just like strategies that you can find, or like triggers, if you know what your triggers are, working through those, or different like mindful strategies. I feel like yoga is really helpful for anxiety and like self-control, things like that. Deep breaths, finding like a quick deep breath or tap that really helps you calm your anxiety. Those are things that would help you work through your anxiety so you can help your child. And then the last one is understanding what triggers your child's worry or anxiety. So like not eating, that can be a big trigger. I know that like if I skip a meal, like that makes me feel so anxious. So that could be a big one for kids. Not sleeping, if they don't get enough sleep, then that can really increase their worries. Sometimes if kids are, like have too much sensory input, like if you can feel like the tag on your back or like their socks messed up in their shoe, that can like increase the anxiety and worry. So if you can figure out which of those things like are really triggering your child, that is so helpful. For, hi Miss Swain's class, for your child. Are you flying, Naomi? Sorry.
This is our intermission.
We are. This is the performance
Oh,
intermission. Silent owls flying across the hall. I'm actually so excited that the owls are going to walk by. The don'ts for responding to anxiety are intensifying the feeling. You obviously don't want to make your child's anxiety worse. So when we're validating the feeling, we want to validate just the feeling. We're validating that they're feeling worried, but we're not really validating like what the worry's about, or like encouraging them to be worried about it. So if they're scared of cats, like you don't want to be like, oh yeah, cats are scary, you should be worried about it. Like I worry about cats all the time. But like validating like, oh yeah, you are feeling worried about that and you're safe. So yeah, you don't want to show them like with your body language or like different like the things that you're doing that you're also worried about it, because then that like validates the worry for them. So like separation is a big one. When parents stay in the classroom and are kind of like lingering, then that really tells the child that, oh, I'm not safe. My mom doesn't want me to be here because she's still here. Like she isn't making me feel safe. So if you are telling your child like with your actions and body language that they like that you're worried about it, that intensifies their feeling, and that's what we don't want to do. Don't avoid things that make your kid anxious. If you avoid it, that again reinforces their feeling of anxiety. So if your child's like really worried about going to a birthday party and they're like, oh, my tummy hurts, I don't want to go, and then you are like, okay, because you're feeling worried about it, we won't go, that tells them that they should be worried. So try to like come up with your strategies that work when they're really anxious, or if there's like repetitive things that you notice are really making them anxious, and then like go through it with them. Yeah, that's sometimes kids get like worried about school and they like might have somatic symptoms of that. So like, oh, my tummy hurts, I don't want to go to school. And if you let them stay home, that just reinforces that like, oh, when I'm anxious, I get to stay home. And that's not what we want to do. Don't fuel their anxiety with, that's just like, don't intensify the feeling. Don't reinforce it with your body language or your nerves. Try to work through those.
And again, if there's something that you feel like you cannot handle, if like drop off is really hard for you and you know that you want to stay and linger, it might be really helpful to have someone else in your circle do drop off or do those things so that you're not intensifying your child's feelings of anxiety. And then don't worry about their worries, so don't anticipate them being worried about it. Like with a cat, if you know you're going somewhere and there's a cat or a dog, and you know their child's worried about it, don't be like, oh man, like I'm really worried that they're going to be worried about it, because that reinforces it and makes them more worried. And then the last one, I didn't put it in there, but don't ignore their worries. That's like the worst thing you can do. That makes it grow, and yeah. So ignoring it and not talking about it is the worst thing. These are just some calming techniques that might be helpful. Deep pressure and like sensory input can be very effective for calming a child. That's like squeezing, even like the head, like if you like squeeze their temples with like the palms of your hand. Weighted blankets, like deep pressure massages on their arms or on their shoulders. Deep breathing can be really helpful. This is like butterfly breathing, what she's doing, where you like cross your arms and you tap on your shoulders. That is like EMDR, I'm not sure what that stands for, but it's like the bilateral stimulation of the brain. So it kind of takes you out of the feeling brain and into your more logical brain. And that can help calm kids down. There's also like elevator breaths where you just like lift your arms and then put it down as you're breathing in and out. You can do a balloon breath, you can do in the morning a lot, like this. Or a pretzel breath where you flip your hands in. That also crosses midline, which helps to calm your nerves. Then grounding techniques can be really helpful. The 3-3-3 method is helpful, really helpful for adults too, where you just name 3 things you see, 3 things you hear, 3 like things that you can feel and touch. That can help bring them out of like really big worry feelings. And also ice packs. I found that ice packs are really effective. You can put them like on the chest and have them lay down, or on the back of the neck or on the face, and like noticing where that cold feeling is. So if your child's anxiety is interfering with their daily activities, becomes unrealistic, uncontrollable, or out of proportion, doesn't go away, or leads to avoidance, you may want to talk to your pediatrician or contact a play therapist. That's like, if these things aren't working and you're trying so many interventions and you notice like, my child can't get through the day without having a million worries, that's when you would want to contact a pediatrician or a play therapist. And or like an example of unrealistic, like if a kid in Florida is worried about hurricanes, that makes sense. If a kid in Missouri is like worried about tornadoes during tornado season, that makes sense. Those are realistic worries. But unrealistic worry would be like a kid in Missouri really worried about hurricanes happening, because that's not going to happen. That's unrealistic. A normal like anxiety or worry would be like crying because you missed mom at school. Like that's normal. That's okay. However, if they're like constantly worrying about their parent not coming back because they're going to die or like get in a car accident, those are worries that are not normal. That would be like uncontrollable. An example of avoidance would be like refusing to go to a birthday party because they're worried a balloon might pop if they're scared of balloons. So if they have like worries that are causing them to avoid things, or like that you just cannot get under control, that's when I recommend talking to a pediatrician or play therapist. I got a lot of this information from childmind.org. And they have a lot of different like mental health things that you can click on. And there's a huge section about anxiety, and it goes over anxiety for little kids up to high schoolers. So that's a really helpful resource to look at. And then some children's books about worry I recommend are Ruby Finds a Worry, Wemberly Worried, The Invisible String, and Jabari Jumps. And if you just Google like children's books about worry, then you can find a lot. And a lot of times if you don't want to buy the book, you can just go on YouTube and look up the read aloud for them. Okay, and then when we picked this topic, we felt like someone was telling us to do it last time, but I could not remember like the specific fears and worries. So if there's any that you have questions about,
I was the one who asked for it.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Yeah. It was a great idea.
The thing that you said that was just most helpful for me was like, what are realistic fears and not realistic fears? So my son my husband always is like, you guys are the same. We have this both like, to the point of tornadoes. Like we'll talk about tornadoes at school because you guys had a drill. Thank you. And then it's like, but I thought we didn't have tornadoes, and I thought tornadoes didn't come to our neighborhood, and like because when he was 2, there was a tornado siren, and I was like, oh no, it's not a real tornado, it's a test that we do. Like, and he took that to mean like we don't have them, and so now then trying to figure out, like, it's helpful for you to say, like, when there's a drill at school, it is appropriate for a 4-year-old to come home and be like, we must talk about tornadoes and I need to know everything. And like, we had to go down to the basement and like figure, like we had to go through the whole process, and it was like a week of tornado talk. And I couldn't, it was really hard for me to understand like how much information to give. I ended up using what people talk about with like how to a baby's made, where I was just like, I answered the exact question honestly and did not embellish anymore. So if he was like, can tornadoes come to our neighborhood? I was like, they could. Yes. And then I just waited. And then he was like, but we go to the basement? I was like, yes. He was like, and we're safe there? And I was like, yes. Like, I kept on wanting to go and to be like, yes. And then, but, there's also like, all, and I was just like, just minimal, like, just answered the questions and answered them 100 times. But that kind of, you even just saying like, but he wasn't nervous about hurricanes or aliens coming and abducting him, or like, you know what I mean? It was like in the realm, so that makes you feel better. He just has a big imagination and helps us with a lot of, but it's not like, he could still come to school and do the things, and it just is hard to know what is appropriate and what is where you wouldn't want to be worried.
Absolutely. And then we have like intuition to protect them, right? Yeah. And just to like my first intuition at least is to be like, everything's fine, you're always going to be safe, it's okay. But I love how Abby really highlights that worrying and anxiety are okay. But in some ways they help keep us safe, right? Like that they're there for a reason. Those emotions are important. And the idea is that, just to recognize that you're feeling worried, but we can get through this and I'm going to help you. It's hard.
The timer thing is interesting. I never considered that, and we do timers for everything else in his life. And so the idea that like we're going to talk about the solution for this thing for 5 minutes, or like, and then we'll work together on a plan. Like that seems like a really cool option too. So it's really helpful. Thank you. I love that.
And that feels like really counterintuitive to me because I love to talk about feelings and I get so loose and I want to like have a conversation and then have a conversation about how we were feeling during that conversation and like break that down in like so many ways. But I think like even like if you find that you have a lot of anxiety, like setting 5 minutes in the morning to worry about cool things and then moving on, that can be like a really helpful tool. So and like I have like a clinical supervisor and she recommended it because I was like, that feels really bad, but it's okay.
It's essentially like having a notebook by your bed to like write down things you're worrying about so you can sleep. It's like the toddler version of it.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Finla. Okay, we're gonna take the chairs and just kind of put them in a circle if you don't mind helping me do that. So Ms. Marston, Mrs. England, and Jenny, if you guys want to introduce yourselves really quickly.
I'm Leslie England. I'm a pre-K teacher here. I was a former toddler teacher, and before that I worked in early childhood, usually in a birth to 3-year-old classroom. We did a LUBI program, so I potty trained over 50, 60 children in my life. So yeah,
in the world.
I'm Emma Marston, and I'm in my 8th year teaching in our toddler program. And I have a master's in early childhood education, and throughout my student teaching, I worked with infants as well through toddler, preschool, and then kindergarten age. So lots of potty training and just in general, not even potty training, but like just it continues, right? The toileting and the overnight potty training and things like that continues for many years. So.
I'm Jenny Flum. I am a pediatric anesthesiologist, so potty training doesn't really fit to the realm of what I do day to day, but I do have kind of a medical background, and I've potty trained 3 kids with 1 to go. My husband is also a urologist, so he's dealt with bowel and bladder dysfunction, so I feel like I have that perspective too. So by no means an expert, but I've spent a lot of time doing it. So.
This is a break for us, right? All right, so we generated some questions up here to help guide us, but it would be great if you guys would ask questions too, so we can kind of get right to it. But we'll start with these, and then parents, if you want to jump in too, even if you're not officially part of the forum, please do with advice on these things. Our first question is, how do we know when our child is ready for potty training? Anyone want to start that?
I mean, I've noticed with my kids a couple of things. First of all, they have to be able to communicate with you that they need to go. Well, I guess first they have to know themselves that they're going. That they have to understand what that sensation is, that they need to use the restroom. So sometimes they can communicate that with you verbally. Sometimes it's just them leaving the room. So they start to kind of develop that awareness that this is something that my body is feeling, and almost have a little bit of embarrassment about it. And so sometimes they will leave and go to another room. And that starts to tell you, okay, we're getting there, that they're starting to enter the, even having the capability to do it. Once they have to have the motor function to get to the bathroom, pull those pants down with a little assistance. But I mean, feel free to.
I completely co-sign what Jenny is saying, and if you notice that they're staying dry for a few hours at a time, that's a great indicator. The motor function is really important, and I think that making sure that they are able to pull up and down their own pants, I mean, like, it will make that journey so much easier.
And I feel like I would work on, like, if they're showing those signs, like fully dressed, like pants on, shoes on, socks, because I mean, if they have an accident, they're gonna wet their socks, they're gonna wet their shoes, and they just need to have that. I feel like having that whole routine down of being able to dress themselves before you start potty training is really key. And you wouldn't think that, like, you're like, oh, I can help them as long as but really it's having that independence to do all of that themselves and giving them that confidence.
Then they master it quicker.
Right.
Is there a difference between, so I have a 17-year-old today and a 10-month-old. And this is my second iteration of St. Paul's. But I did not potty train my daughter. My first husband's mother did before me. Is there a difference between potty training a boy and a girl? And what are those views? What does it look like?
Same question.
Do you have a boy now or a
I have a boy now. Charlotte was amazing.
Yeah.
Charlotte is amazing.
She is amazing. And I used to like complain about, oh my gosh, that I had my son.
Yeah.
No, it's different.
I only have boys, so I can't speak from experience. But I mean, theoretically, girls are sometimes ready a little bit earlier than boys.
Okay.
They care more a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
There's a bit
boys.
more awareness.
Yeah.
And again, it's not black or white. I mean, it could, but yeah, and I feel like boys, at least from seeing it in the toddler program, they typically potty train later.
Mm-hmm. Later as in, like, I think Charlotte was potty trained before 2, maybe.
Mm-hmm. So
she was
ready to rock.
Yeah.
That's not surprising.
The boys, so am I thinking, what, 3?
Closer to 3.
Closer to 3, but that's not how it always is, though. You know, that's not, it's not black and white in that way.
But when you wait till they're ready, even if it's later to 3, you will go from potty training from, if you start them too young, I find that you're potty training for 4 or 5 months, that if you wait till they're ready, even if it's a little bit later, 3 I feel like is a new age even for girls.
And if they're coming to the toddler program, they don't have to be potty trained till preschool.
Yeah,
So take your time. And we, as the toddler team, we say that, like, take your time, like, and talk to us. If you're saying, okay, I'm seeing some signs of readiness at home. What are you seeing at school? Are they showing any interest? Because home and school are really different places, And I think, that's the biggest emphasis, especially if they're going to be in this program. Like, they have time. There's no rush, we don't feel that pressure. I mean, now, come springtime, if we're thinking, okay, in preschool, they need to be fully potty trained. That's when we probably start that conversation with you, but don't push it. Yeah.
Preschool is 3 here or 4?
3.
Depends.
So toddler is 2 to 3-year-olds, preschool is 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Mm-hmm. And something about girls that, and I experienced this as a little girl, is little girls too learn to hold it. And so sometimes that can cause things like UTIs and things like that. So there is a level of thoughtfulness in terms of not potty training your girl too early as well. I mean, like, I think 2 is great, And again, if you've got an 18-month-old and she's ready to rock and go, then that's great. But to just be watchful of that with little girls, because they will hold it. They don't want to miss out on their play. They don't want to miss out, and then that can cause some issues.
I have my first potty training experience was with our son, and then I have 2 girls. But yeah, with our son, we waited a little bit longer, and for the girls, yeah, really, I'm not more into it. Looking back.
My son kept asking to go potty. We ended up potty at 2.5, but around like a little after 2, he started asking to go potty before he took a bath or a shower. Like he wanted to use the potty, and my first thought was like, oh my gosh, like diapers are easy. They come everywhere with us. He's gonna pee all over the walls. Like, this is, like I'm thinking of all that stuff, and my husband got really excited. He's like, he wants to go to the bathroom, and so that was a really nice opportunity for the first time in our life for me to say like, you guys share parts, like go. And they would like do potties. They would like, he would help with potty before bath time, and it led me to the point of anxieties. Was like, I'm not gonna bring my preconceived notion of a boy peeing all over my walls into this energy, and so that was a really good opportunity for my, like I was in charge of sleep training and feeding and all these things, and so it was kind of like, here, you boys do your boy thing, and it helped me relax a little bit into it. By the time he was really ready to potty train, he had practiced going on the potty. He was into it and that sort of thing. So I don't know, finding another man in his life that you can partner with him too might be a different thing than with your daughter.
And I think that's so great, that level of like playfulness around the potty of like, sure, you want to go, let's do it, let's sit on it. What do you think? You want to try it out? Like not, and like a kind of a no pressure situation. But more like, yeah, let's try it, you know? Whenever they ask or whenever they're interested, like, sure, let's rip that diaper. I mean, we do that in the toddler room all the time. You know, kiddos that are in diapers see their peers using the potty, and sometimes they're like, can I sit on the potty? And we're always like, sure, of course. We'll put a new diaper on you afterwards. You know, that level of, because that kind of brings that comfortability around it too. When it's like, yeah, give it a shot, you know? But then that also doesn't mean, okay, it's happening, they sat on the potty, and tomorrow we're getting underwear, you know? Kind of allowing that time of that buffer to you know, just them being exposed to it. Yeah.
All right, that was a great conversation on the first one too. So for those of you who have children who are pre-potty training, is there anything that we can do to prepare our children for potty training?
Kind of like what we said, just making sure you're working with them to pull up and down and getting dressed. I know it takes a little bit more time. I know mornings are kind of hard to be like, oh, let's, you know, maybe you choose in the, you know, at night after bath time to really let them put on their, you know, pajamas and do it all themselves. Just prepping them as much as, giving them that independence as much as you can before. That's what
loose waistbands,
yeah,
you know, no button pants, just loose waistbands.
No overalls.
They are cute, but they're
so cute.
Yeah, and even if they put their underwear on and it's inside out and the pants are backwards and the tag is sticking out, you did it.
Yeah,
I mean,
good work.
no need to try and correct that. You got it, you did it.
Easy maneuver.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then once they're in sweats, they'll probably never go back. So
Right.
Yeah, put them in cute outfits now.
Yeah.
Do they even make jeans for babies anymore? I mean, I've never.
Oh, they
thought
do.
of it.
Oh,
My
they
kids,
do.
that's what we did, but now they're, you know, it's all the sweatpants and all the cozy things which are perfect
Yeah.
for potty.
Okay. What gear is actually helpful? So much gear for kids these days.
Are you talking about like the little potties or like the potty like modifiers?
All
like,
of that.
Okay.
Yeah, all of that.
I found like those seats that go on the potty that have I feel like anything that has to do with the real potty is I mean, the little toilets are nice, like if you're in the, you know, they're in the living room, like, oh, jump on. But I mean, is that realistic? It's not, to me, it's not, but I mean.
And then you have to clean it.
But I know, exactly. Any gear that has them using your real toilet is, I think is.
I do think for some kids, the real toilet can be a little intimidating.
Sure.
It's big, it's loud. I think depending, I mean, you know your kid and sometimes you have to let them guide you. So I personally, I did like the little potty for the very initial stages just because it was everywhere with us. That only lasted a couple of weeks and then kind of graduated to the big potty. But probably some kids would be, well, like Grape was a big potty from the start. So I think it just depends on the kid. Somewhat gear related, but keeping the kids hydrated during the time when you're potty training them for a couple of reasons. We're not big juice drinkers, but during the potty training time, we gave a lot of juice to our kids just because it would allow them to drink a lot more than they typically would. And that allows reinforcing the process of going through it just because they're gonna have to use the restroom more. And it also keeps them from getting constipated, because that's one thing that can really set people back, is if kids aren't drinking a lot, they start to get backed up and constipated. That can affect their urine and their bowels, and then they might hold their poop because it hurts to go. So, just something you might not necessarily think about, but maybe integrated. Flushable wipes too. They make these wipes that you can use and then flush down the toilet. That's the game changer.
Did you limit the time? Was there a cutoff time for fluids at night?
You know, we never focused on nighttime potty train. We kind of let that, for us personally, we let that happen just when they kind of naturally did. We're ready. We did that a lot, the nighttime, a lot later than we did daytime potty training. I mean, years later, because it can be normal for a kid to still pee pull-ups until like 7. I mean, and there's a huge range of variability. Some kids will be dry at night at 2, and some kids it's later. So yeah, we didn't necessarily do that until they were a little older, but I think it's not wrong to do so.
That's actually a great segue. We had that question up here.
Well, I think that the nighttime, that's a great point of like not stressing about nighttime as much, because you guys are talking about sleep. Before, you know, like I think that all potty training and sleep habits and all those, you know, and if you're not stressing about potty training at night, then that will, you know, if you're having kids that's struggling with sleep, that's like one thing you can take off your plate, because you have so much on your plate all the time. And yeah, I feel like pull-ups until, I would say 7 is really common.
And the two gear things that were big for my kiddo. One is underwear he was excited to wear, and the other was a motivating something that celebrated this big boy step. And so for him, it was an M&M. But like my niece, it was like girls are different. She wanted a little lovey, and so the lovey was like a part of her. We actually did get my son a little like STEM toy with a little drill, because for the first day we like contained him to one room because we didn't want potty accidents everywhere. So we had a new toy that we played with that day to be like, we called it potty training party, and he was all excited to like play with this new toy and whatever. The Chiefs were on, so it was like celebratory for everybody. I think it was like last AFC championship 2 times ago or something. But it was that like things that made it fun and not a chore. And again, his dad was really better at that than I was. I was like, we have wipes, we have paper towels, we have cloths. Like I had all that gear, but things that made him like, it was a big step, and I get to be excited about it. It was like huge. Mickey Mouse everywhere was big.
Yeah. When my kids potty trained, we had a special little bag of toys that were usually easily like sanitizable, and that was only accessible when they were sitting on the potty. And so they looked forward to playing with those special things when they were trying to go, because it, as you know, it does take time. Like it's not just that they go potty and get up. Like there's a lot of turning and failing. And
we had potty books. I hate to say it, and I know we're just adding the things. These may not be important, but to the point of point number 2 and bowel movements being tricky, we had a couple of books like the Everybody Poops book and some of those that again sat in the bathroom, and we read them while he was sitting there. So it was like, you know, it was a new thing to figure out how to go on the potty. So it would be, the less he thought about it as we read the books, then he's like, I did it, you know, that sort of thing. So that was fun.
The things that we did was to get away from constantly asking our kids, do you need to go potty? Do you need to go potty? Do you need to go potty? And we turned it and said, tell mommy when you need to go potty. And just a reminder, tell me when you need to go potty. You know, because they are easily distracted. Their attention spans are very short. But so we would say it very frequently. But it wasn't a question like that they needed to respond to. It was just say, just tell me when you need to go potty. And just to try and catch that, oh, I do need to go potty. And okay, that's great, let's go. And that was really helpful. And it didn't turn it into a struggle.
So that was
I like that.
just
Because if
changing
you,
that for
yeah, because if you ask them, do you need to go potty, if they're busy, they don't want to stop.
Right, say no.
Oh, okay.
Toddler room is a lot of, it's time to go potty. I mean, it's very much like, you can play once you've gone potty. We can go outside once you've gone potty. But that again is, there's that mob mentality of like, everybody's going.
Right.
It's not, do you need to go potty? It's time to go potty.
Well, and starting that routine, like back to my worry about like, well, we have diapers all the time and I can run to Target when I need to, and like starting the routine early of we go potty before we leave the house, we go potty before meals, we go potty before bed. We started like double, so we go potty before bath time, then we do bath time and teeth and books, and then right before bed he goes potty because he doesn't wear a pull-up at night. But it took that, like he now doesn't question before we get in the car to go to school, we gotta go potty. And so that helps too with the they've emptied before you are on the way to grandma's house or you're doing whatever in the car. And surprises come up, but I was surprised how much he was used to at school having these points where they like everyone went potty. And so when I started doing that at home, it was like the number of times I sat down with a more meal and then it was potty time. I was like, okay, like start these routines before these.
Do you guys want to interject with questions? Anyone have one? Okay. The next one up here is, why does my child have an easy time peeing? And
Jenny?
I don't know why.
You have the answer to this, right?
I mean, kind of. I just think the pooping, it takes more effort. I think that sometimes it's scary to them, which seems so weird, but I think just the whole idea of it is scary to a little kid, something coming out of their body. And sometimes it hurts versus peeing typically doesn't. So again, with my experience, the pooping took longer than the peeing, and sometimes the peeing they would hold for long amounts of time. And so just again, keeping them hydrated, keeping them eating lots of fiber and fruits and vegetables, and just being patient. It's not all the books kind of say it's a 3-day thing. In my experience, for the poop, it took longer than that. So.
And I've had kiddos, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this, is they'll ask for a diaper to go through. And listen, I didn't hate that idea for a while. I said, again, eventually it will happen, but if they know enough to say, I need a diaper to go to the bathroom, I mean, it's just, obviously they're not going to go to kindergarten, doing it, so just be patient with it. I don't know what you guys think about it. If they were to have the ability to do it, eventually I would want to easily, I'm like, oh, let's try to go on the toilet first. But I've seen that happen too, and eventually, you ease them out of that too. But obviously you don't want to ask them, do you want to diaper? You know what I mean? You don't want to encourage that.
I mean that's an exaggeration, but they really, it can be, yeah. And yeah, I think that for a little bit to just get them comfortable, like if they ask for a diaper or pull up for food, yeah, and then, but
and you don't want
to your point,
forever,
you're going,
right,
so that's,
exactly, that's half the battle right there, but I have seen that a little bit.
And even little things you can do make a big difference. Kids are used to standing in their diaper to have a bowel movement, and so sometimes sitting on the toilet with their legs dangling, it just feels funny. So we started putting a stool underneath their feet, and it made it so much easier for them.
That goes back to the ear thing too, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
Don't they have them just for that? Like they're higher
they have them
schools
for
to make
adults.
their
There's a cure for everybody.
Yeah, that's a good gear.
But it's such a little thing, and it can sometimes make such a big difference depending on the kid.
I also think stories about everybody poops, things like that can be really helpful. Or if you have a social story oh, here's your stomach, you squeeze your tummy muscles to go poop, and explaining it.
And Abby's made those
I have.
so many books for our children.
I've learned a lot about our waste management system and the potty training. The number of questions I got about where's it go? And I was like, that's a good question. I'm not worried about that one. Let's to YouTube. Let's learn. Talk a lot about pipes.
we're almost out of time, so I'm going to open it up. Any questions that we haven't answered? Any potty training topics that you would like to talk about?
Something that, and we briefly brought this up before, but this is one of the most effective things that I have found is making sure that we've talked about this, making sure that they're able to pull up and down their own pants. But if they have an accident, which is inevitable, especially with pee, have them change their own clothes. And it's not a punishment, it is just there's no shame. It's a natural consequence. And it's very, the way in the toddler room, the way that we do it, and the way that I do it is, that must feel uncomfortable. Let me get you some dry pants and some dry underwear. Sit on your bottom, and you kind of coach them through it. Take off your shoes, take off your socks, pull off your pants, and then you leave the underwear and the pants there, and you coach them through it so that they kind of figure it out. But allowing them, because something clicks in their brain of, I don't get to stand here like a frozen squirrel while my mom peels off all this wet stuff, and then I'm
a diaper
good.
change at that point.
It's a diaper change. So, and again, it's not a punishment. It's, you got this, you can do it. Pull your pants, there you go, and then put one foot in. And sometimes it requires a little bit of assistance. Let's get your foot through the hole. There you go, now pull it up. And eventually, when they learn how to do that, they're gonna realize, I have to leave my play and leave whatever I was doing because I need to go change my clothes. And it's very much, once they learn and once
Or
they
they're
master
like,
that.
I don't want to sit and clean my clothes for
No, and it doesn't feel good. No, it doesn't. And again, as the adult, that's what the consequence is. It's that there's no shame coming from the adult. It's that must feel uncomfortable. How about you go ahead and get yourself changed? And eventually, it's kind of crazy how the light bulb goes off.
Now, if it's a bowel movement, which that will happen too, you help them through that part, you get that out, but then they still have to finish.
Wipe their bottom,
Yes,
make sure they're
finish.
clean,
I
and
still
then
have
say, great, here's your dry underwear, here's your pants, here's your socks, here's your shoes. You got this. You can do
they're
it.
Still trying
And
to
it
put
may
their
be
clothes back
backwards,
on.
upside down, and underneath. But if they've got it on their body, you did it. Great, you're ready to go.
It's good to remember. I remember Charlotte had one accident and she was just heartbroken.
Yes, they get devastated.
She was devastated.
Yes.
I wanted to cry for her.
Aww.
But you still have to remember that it's still their job
Yeah.
to clean
Right.
themselves and
Yes.
to change their clothes.
Sure, and you can be encouraging. You've got this. That doesn't feel good. I believe you. Let's get you changed so you feel better. You can do this. Yeah.
My 4-year-old. Our accidents now are like I pee through the toilet onto my pants.
Oh,
like I clean well. And I'm right there and I'm like, okay, here are your pants and da-da-da-da-da-da. And of course at school, I know he doesn't, Mrs. Bruns is doing it. Yeah. But I can quickly go back into toddler mode and
Well, and two, you probably have, it's time for dinner, you're going somewhere else. It's, you just want to get through it.
No, but I love that.
It's so natural to do that.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Plum, thank you, Marston, thank you, England.
I learned some things too. No, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.